it's time to hear from you. We hope that you've been thinking over the remarks from our speakers and the film that we've just seen, and hope that it may have stimulated some question or comment that you would like to make. So please don't be shy, just put your hand up. And I would just ask you to be brief, and if you'd like to ask a specific panel member the question, you can do that, or we can just ask anyone on the panel to respond. So the gentleman there, yes.
Dalia, thank you very much.
Could you tell us who you are, please?
I'm JJ Emery. Thank you very much for coming to speak with us this evening. It's great that you're here, and I love the movie. It's a great production. Thank you very much. My question, I guess, is basically, in the same way you're saying it's dangerous to paint with broad strokes, is it challenging or difficult to paint with broad strokes with the research you've developed? Is it difficult to take and kind of discern a conclusion from some of the raw data? And the example I would give is, the one thing I saw in the film was that somewhere around 80% or upward of 80% in many of the cases of the questions you asked, people had said that I think a woman should be able to work for any job she's qualified for. And I'm wondering, is there the possibility that if you're asking a woman for a job she's qualified for, her interpretation of that might be, well, I'm not qualified to work in a job that's outside of my house. So I'm not qualified to work in the same place a man would work. I mean, are there difficulties in asking the questions and drawing conclusions from them?
Great question. Thank you for asking. Absolutely. It's very important to analyze the data within the context that it's being asked. And I have gotten that question several times. Well, how do we know what they mean by qualified? Or maybe they're only qualified to be, moms and homemakers. But we actually ask another question within that same set, where we ask them if a woman should be able to serve in senior levels of government, in the cabinet or the parliament. And we get majorities who say that they should as well. So we always analyze our data within the entire set of data that we have. So we know from that second or that other question that people aren't simply thinking of, issue qualified for any job for which she is qualified for does include things outside the home and in professional fields. And the other thing is, if you look at UN data, you find that in many countries that we research, the percentage of professional workers that are female is around a third. It's comparable to many European countries. So you look at reality, or you actually look at some of the other data, you find that what people are likely talking about is actually a professional job outside the home.
Okay, would Alex or Dr. El-Hibri, would you like to comment on that question, or we can just move on? Okay. Marianne, did you have your hand up?
I did. It's kind of I'm Marianne Stein with the Fund for Global Human Rights. And it's kind of a follow-up to what you two were talking about. And that is, when I look at that, and I look at the reality of women's opportunities, their education, the treatment of girls, etc., there's a disconnect here. And so it raises questions to me about whether people are answering things that they think you want to hear, or they think are the correct answers, or the more enlightened answers, as opposed to what they really think. And one of the things, too, that I would have found really interesting would be a comparison of on gender equity issues, would be a comparison of the responses of men and the responses of women. I don't know whether you broke this down, whether you looked at rural versus city or other kinds of things. And it would be, I think, very interesting to know that.
Well, the film actually does cover, on the one question that we chose to put in the film, the responses of men and women. So we certainly did break it out that way, and looked at education levels as well as religiosity, actually, which I can talk about in a second. Now, are people just giving us answers that they think we want to hear? The answer is, it's not likely, for one simple reason. Interviewers that went into the home were local people, so they're not sort of people aren't talking to an American and wanting to sort of look a certain way. They are talking to someone who is from their own community, and not all the questions, not all the answers were necessarily safe answers. I mean, people were open about their perception of corruption in their society. They were open about criticizing Muslim societies and what was wrong with them. And they talked about fanaticism, and in some cases they talked about a deficit in gender equality. So we are very aware of the possibility of socially, social desirability in survey research in general, all over the world, not just in Muslim societies. And so we have to look at a lot of other things to see how people are answering, and we have to try very hard to craft questions, and this is the whole kind of art and science of survey research, that are neutral, that aren't leading the respondent one way or the other, that are giving them space to answer honestly. We have to try to create a flow of a questionnaire where trust is built between two people, and that's why we do things in the home, in a sort of safe environment. Now, the disconnect between the reality on the ground and what people are saying, there is a disconnect in some places. As I mentioned, Saudi Arabia, there is, people's sentiment is ahead of reality on the ground. But in some places, I would say that there isn't this great disconnect that we might assume exists. I mean, when it comes to things like education and the workplace, places like the UAE, the vast majority of college graduates, for example, are women. They're a growing force in the professional field. It doesn't mean that there isn't more to be done, but that a lot of progress is actually occurring. And so it really is important to disaggregate, and I'm only talking about the Middle East, and then when you go outside, there's even more diversity. But each society really has its own issues. In many cases, Muslim women are way ahead of where we think they are in their own societies in terms of leading in academic fields, in medicine, and even in religious studies. I mean, I think that many people are surprised to find out how many women are professors in Al-Azhar who are interpreting law, who are scholars of religion. This is not a foreign concept or a new concept. So I think that basically to explain the disconnect between what we see in terms of public sentiment of women's rights and our image of Muslim women, I'd say three things. First, that I don't think we always have an accurate picture of what's happening among Muslim societies in terms of women. Two, there is a difference between culture and religion, and in some cases, reality on the ground is dictated by other issues rather than just how people might believe. And then three, there's the socioeconomic issues. In many cases, when you look at sentiment, it is, in terms of women, lower socioeconomic levels have less pro-women views than higher socioeconomic levels, and then you can see on the ground realities that reflect socioeconomic realities where women are disadvantaged. So the issue of are people giving us kind of the answer we want, I don't think they are, because of the fact that they are just talking to a peer about issues that are important to them, and they do give non-safe answers to a lot of questions.